The weather outside may be cold, but the hot stove will keep us warm. The Rangers sign Chris Martin. Is he their closer? And does this mean that the Rangers are done making moves for MLB free agents at least? We'll talk about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers, the first and best daily Rangers podcast. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into the Rangers signing Chris Martin, the relief pitcher, hopefully, maybe even their closer, maybe their setup man, and what else this means for the rest of the Rangers offseason, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, I wanted this week to be all about prospects. I'll still have 5 episodes this week just talking about my Rangers' top 30 prospects. Maybe I push one till Monday, but the Rangers interrupted that news to make one of, if not their actual last free agent signing. We'll talk about if it's their last or not. But they signed Chris Martin, right-handed relief pitcher, Arlington native, Arlington high school graduate, former Texas Ranger in 2018 and a little bit of 2019 before he was traded to the Braves. Big, tall righty, another tall right-handed Chris that is from the DFW area who throws right-handed baseballs and throws them a little bit harder than I think Chris Young does at this point. But the one person close to looking Chris Young in the eye, the 6'8" Arlington native, signs a 1-year, $5.5 million deal with the Texas Rangers. That dollar figure coming from a report out of Boston. Chris Cotillo of MassLive.com reporting that the Rangers signed Martin, who was a former Red Sox the last couple of years, pitched very well in Boston. They signed him to a $5.5 million deal, and that the Red Sox, they had a more lucrative offer on the table. But Chris Martin said, "No thank you, Boston. I'm coming back to Texas." He has also said publicly that this is going to be his last year in the big leagues. Martin is on the older side. He turns, I believe, 39 pretty quickly on this season. This is going to be his age 39 season. He has been very consistent the last couple of years, basically since coming back over from Japan. He spent his first couple of seasons in the big leagues kind of mulling about, not really having that much success. Pitched in 2014, made his debut with the Rockies, had a 6.8 ERA, nearly 6.9, which was not nice. Then pitched with the Yankees in 2015, ERA north of 5.5. Then went to Japan 2016-17, came back with Texas, had a decent comeback season at 32 in 2018. Then was really, really good in 2019. Rangers traded him to Atlanta for Colby Allard, which, it worked out okay for Atlanta because he still had 3 seasons of 2 seasons, I believe, of team control, or a season and a half, whatever it was. But he pitched for Atlanta in 2021 when the Braves won it all. But his best year of his career came not that long ago when the Rangers were winning the whole dang thing in 2023. A 1.05 ERA in 55 games for the Red Sox that year. 51 in the third innings, 46 strikeouts. This year, an ERA a little bit higher than the batted ball luck indicated he deserves. He had a FIP of 278. His ERA was right around 3.5. More strikeouts than innings pitched this year. He has always been a guy who strikes out a lot. He has been more of a setup man in the past, hasn't been as much of a closer, but again, it's 2025. Having a certified back-end closer, guy who's got closer experience, it's kind of a little old school at this point. Martin is a guy who has really, really good control, never beats himself with walks, which you love to see in a back-end reliever, not putting himself into jams with a whole bunch of free passes. That is something he has been fantastic at in his career. 1.2 walks per nine in his career, 9.3 Ks per nine. That is a stellar walk to strikeout ratio. And even when he wasn't having a whole lot of success in Colorado and New York, this is something he has never done. He has never had more than 3 walks per 9 innings. Actually, 2.6 walks per 9 innings is the career high. That's the worst he's ever done. You love to see that in a back-end reliever. And as great as Yates is, Yates was great at basically everything last year. Not walking guys was the one thing he didn't do well. That walks were the one thing that Yates struggled with. And I still think that there's something left in there for the Rangers to do with their pen. But as it stands right now, I think there's still moves to be made. But for right now, what the Rangers bullpen looks like, Chris Martin is for sure your day one closer. That's out of the question. There's nobody else that I think will supersede him unless Robert Garcia comes in and just looks absolutely unhittable and Martin looks really bad, which is possible. It's possible. Relievers are finicky. And the Rangers have now, I believe this is number 6 reliever that the Rangers have tried to bring in. And at this point, the top end guys, last year the Rangers had 2 very, very good relievers. One okay reliever in Leclerc, and then a bunch of not great guys. This year, it seems the approach, at least at this point, if this is the final pen, we'll get into if it is and why I would rather it not be in segments 2 and 3. But if this is the final pen, it seems like more of an approach of, okay, we're going to have a bunch of guys that are probably at least okay, and nobody who's bad. But given that these are relievers, probably 1 or 2 of these guys will end up being bad. One of, Jacob Webb or Sean Armstrong or Hobie Milner, Daniel Robert, Jacob Latz, maybe even Chris Martin or Robert Garcia. One of those guys or 2 of those guys might end up being just really, really bad. But the math also probably says that 1 or 2 of those guys are also going to be a lot better than we expect, like probably really darn good. Robert Garcia, probably going to be really good. In terms of your high leverage relief guys that you have on this roster, Sports is going to miss the first 2, if not 3 months of this season. We'll see what he looks like when he comes back. Hopefully it's October 2023 Josh Sborz. That'd be great. But then your other high leverage relief guys, obviously Chris Martin. Even if Sborz comes back and looks like his old self, I'm pretty sure Martin at this point would be the closer. Then you have Robert Garcia, who I really, really like. Maybe you see a lot of Sean Armstrong in some of those high leverage spots. Maybe you see Jacob Webb, Hobie Milner. Those guys, I'd feel better if they were your 6th, 7th mid-leverage relief guys. But if one of them ends up being your 8th inning guy, then it's not a horrible spot to be in. You'd kind of rather Chris Martin be pushed down, go get some medium money closer. Not that I want the Rangers to spend $1 bazillion on Tanner Scott or really any reliever for more than a 2-year deal. I think any reliever for more than a 2-year deal scares the bejeepers out of me, even if you are getting Josh Hader, as we saw how well that worked out, paying him nearly $100 million. But this pen is solid at this point. This is at least a middle-of-the-road bullpen. Maybe a couple of these guys fall off, and maybe only one of these guys has great seasons, but you do still have depth options in the minor leagues that could jump up and play a role. I talked a little bit about Mark Church earlier this week. I talked a little bit about Skylar Hales earlier this week as well, both of whom I think could be in the Rangers pen, will be in the Rangers pen at some point this season. Maybe if the Rangers say, okay, well, we're not really sure about Jack Leiter as a starter, we're going to throw him in the pen. I think that will take longer than this one season of them making that choice on Leiter. Emiliano Teodo is a guy who I think could jump up and get in this pen. I'll talk more about him later on this week. Maybe Thursday or Friday's episode, I think, is where he's ranking. Not to give away my rankings, but the point is, the depth of this pen is so much better than it was last year. The Rangers made a lot of moves, and some of these moves, just prepare yourself. Some of them aren't going to work out, but they are not big money, risky signings. This is in my opinion, the ideal way to build a bullpen. If you're going to do it through free agency, and if you have to trade away Nathaniel Lowe to make some room financially, and you get a guy like Robert Garcia, who you do have, making league minimum and under team control for 4 or 5 more seasons after this. I like that. I like that a lot. And there's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. No matter who it is, no matter how much it is, no matter what it is, it's 1 year, and it can't hamstring you for more than 1 year. The Rangers, right now, they had some words to say. Their GM, Ross Fenstermaker, not their executive president of being in charge of the actual back at or front office, Chris Young, but Ross Fenstermaker had some comments saying, this is it. This is all the Rangers are doing in terms of their bullpen. I'm going to tell you why I don't think that's necessarily true right after this. This show is brought to you by Gametime. You know, I love going to live events. You know, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy, one of my favorite memories this past year was going to a baseball game. And I'm willing to bet that one of my favorite memories in 2025 will also be going to a baseball game, because one of my favorite memories in 2023 was also going to a baseball game. And you know the best way to get those tickets to any baseball game or whatever live event you're wanting to go to, that is Gametime. They make it so much easier with this new feature to get to your favorite events. It's called Gametime Picks. It filters out the fluff. It shows you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of different tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. I'll be back tomorrow with the next part in my top 30 prospect ranking series. Assuming the Rangers don't do anything else dramatic this week, which, who knows at this point? But it seems like the Rangers are at least indicating at this point, this might be it for their bullpen. This was a tweet from Jeff Wilson this afternoon. He tweeted out, GM Ross Fenstermaker says, #Rangers are comfortable with the group of relievers they've signed. A closer is no longer a primary target, though the Rangers are open to adding a proven closer. That is from Jeff Wilson, DLLS Rangers beat writer, talking to Rangers GM Ross Fenstermaker. Now, I respect Ross, and I respect Jeff Wilson tweeting out this is what Ross said. But at this time of year, never trust what the GMs actually are saying. Trust what they do. Trust what front offices do, not what they say. They say things. They say a lot of things. A lot of people say a lot of things. There's a lot of reports that go on reporting a lot of different things that don't always happen. And while, yeah, it would be kind of dumb if the Rangers said, yeah, no, we actually hate this group of relievers. We need to sign a whole bunch more people because we actually don't love it. They're not going to say anything like that. But this is all about leverage. The Rangers have been linked to both Chris Martin and Kirby Yates, and really until they signed Chris Martin for $5.5 million, which is a heck of a deal, honestly, for a guy who's going to be at least your setup man, at most your closer. That's a really, really good deal for a guy who has been proven and who chose to come here. Now, it felt like this news breaking out meant that I thought initially that it meant, okay, well, a deal for Yates is not that far off, because it felt like this Martin reunion was going to happen. It felt like this is where he wanted to be. If this is going to be his last year, then it makes sense of him coming home and deciding, yeah, I'm going to play my last year a little bit closer to home. But this seems like a leverage play of Ross Fenstermaker saying, yeah, we don't need Kirby Yates. We don't need to sign whatever other closers are out there on the market that we've been talking to, whether that's Tanner Scott or Carlos Estevez. Not that I have reports that they're talking to either of them, but it just makes an obvious sense. Just like every reliever, every team could use just one more leverage reliever, just like pretty much every team could use one more starting pitcher. But then I started to look into it. And I had a sense of, okay, the Rangers, it felt like in the back of my head, they had enough money before they hit the luxury tax, which is allegedly their whole goal. And it would be, the worst thing in the world if the Rangers hit the luxury tax and didn't reset it this year, because, that'd be so awful that a team competing for a World Series pays a luxury tax a third year in a row. God forbid. But then I looked into it, went to the FanGraphs roster resource with the Rangers' estimated tax payroll, and I saw, that's a little closer than I thought to that $241 million. According to FanGraphs, their estimated luxury tax payroll, the Texas Rangers, right now sits at $234.697 million. Now, what's all that to say? Well, the competitive balance tax, the first level, is $241 million. So we do that quick math, and that leaves about $6.3 million before the Rangers hit that luxury tax. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means Ray Davis is going to have to pay a little bit more if they hit it. But the basic premise of the luxury tax, the Rangers, why they care so much about this, other than, saving their owner a few $1 million, which he doesn't really need to save because you're a billionaire, spend that extra couple $1 million. But the Rangers have been in the luxury tax the last few years, and so when you're in the first year of the luxury tax, every dollar you spend over, you get a 20% surcharge on that. In the second year, it's at 30%. So every dollar you spend $1.30. And then the third year or more consecutively, you're spending $1.50 for every dollar over. Now, the baseline level is $241 million. Then there's more surcharges if you get up between $20 and $40 million. Then you add another 12 cents on the dollar if you're that much higher up. Then if you're $40 to $60 million over, you're spending $1.425 for times whatever you're spending, in addition to the I think that's that is in addition to the 50% that you're spending if you're for the third year in a row. And then if you get into the Cohen zone, then you're spending basically twice as much. You're paying $2.10 for every dollar that you spend if you're in the tax for the third year in a row, and you're more than $60 million over that luxury tax. So basically $300 million is about where that's going to be. And yeah, the Mets are going to be spending quite a bit of money. So that, $800 million or whatever that they're going to end up paying Soto, it might be closer to $1.5 billion that they actually spend on it. But it's not your money, so you shouldn't care all that much. But what does it mean in practical terms? Well, let's look at where it is with talking about this one player that the Rangers have left to get. I think if they sign one more MLB free agent, it will be Kirby Yates or some other closer. But let's look at this practically. Now, say the Rangers sign Kirby Yates to the Blake Treinen deal. I think that Kirby Yates is probably going to get 2 years, even though he is very much on the older side, even though he did have 3 years in the injury wilderness where he wasn't that good. He had a couple years where he was one of the best closers in baseball, then 3 years where it took him to get back from Tommy John surgery, and then this past year, $4.5 million for him. If the Rangers could just do that again, they very much would. But when you have the second best ERA among relievers in baseball and one of the best strikeout rates and nobody's hitting you at all and you're one of the best relievers in the whole world, you're not going to settle for 1 year, $4.5 million. So say Texas pays Kirby Yates 2 years, $22 million total, $11 mil per year. So the Rangers have $6.3 million before they hit the luxury tax. So you knock that out, that's luxury tax free. And then that puts them $4.7 million over the tax. So you add that 50%, that $1.50 that you're spending for every dollar over the luxury tax that would be $2.35 million. So that means this year, instead of paying him $11 million, they pay him $13.35 million. Now, it probably will be, I think, maybe more than that Blake Treinen deal. I honestly have no idea. The market for relievers is so weird right now and so stalled. I think once Tanner Scott signs them, we'll kind of get more of an idea of what the market is. But that's kind of a practical way to look at it. It's not that much. The Rangers and the people who are writing about this luxury tax like, oh my God, it would kill these poor billionaires. It's $2.3 million. Say they ratchet that up to $5 million, then it would be probably an extra $5 million, $15 million a year, as opposed to, the $11 million a year. Then I think you would add, let's see if my math is mathing correctly. It'd be, let's see, around $4 million, $4.3 million, I think, in luxury tax that they'd be paying. Still, not all that much. But I get the idea. I get the Rangers wanting to get under that luxury tax, especially if they're going to have to start paying guys in arbitration like Josh Young in a couple of years, like eventually they'll get to Evan Carter, like Josh Smith, like Jonah Heim, maybe whatever they're going to pay for Adolis Garcia in year 3 of arbitration in 2026. Who knows what that will be? But if the Rangers are dead set, if they will absolutely die if they get to that luxury tax, but they still want to add one more reliever, there's a way they can do it. It's not going to be the nicest thing. It's not going to be the best winning baseball move. But I have an idea of how they could add one more reliever, even at elite prices, and still get themselves onto that luxury tax. How they do it right after this. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. They got all kinds of different baseball odds right now. The Rangers win total for 2025 set at 85.5 wins, over 85.5 wins, minus 102, under 85.5 wins, minus 120. Interesting. They think that the Rangers are not going to win more than 85.5 games? I don't know. That feels a little low. You can go check out all the action, all the different lines they've got at FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. We'll be back with 3 more episodes this week talking about my top 30 Rangers prospects before the 2025 season. There is, before we get into how the Rangers would make space to sign a Kirby Yates or maybe Tanner Scott or whoever the heck else they want to pay as their actual closer instead of Martin. There is one more thing about Chris Martin that I did want to talk about. He did spend a couple of different stints on the IL last year. I know he is 38. He's heading into his age 39 season. He'll turn 39 around the midpoint of next season. But he spent a couple of trips on the IL, even though he's been mostly durable. Not the most durable the last couple years. And an interesting little tidbit there, one of his IL stints was due to issues with elbow inflammation in his throwing elbow. And then in June, he missed some time with anxiety. He was very open about his struggles with mental health. I also struggled with anxiety. And I think that's one of the first instances that I've seen of a big leaguer being put on the IL for anxiety. You know, you may think, oh, well, why don't you just pitch through it? But he said it was affecting his sleep, affecting, how he was, recovering, how he was, pitching on the mound. It very much affects your entire body. So I really respect the Red Sox for, giving him the resources and support to go through that, and respect to him for being open and honest and vulnerable talking about that, because it's a difficult thing to talk about. But let's talk about money. Another difficult thing to talk about: the Rangers with $6.3 million before they get to the luxury tax. If they signed Kirby Yates, I don't think he will make less. I think he will make more than $6.3 million. So if Texas is hell-bent, which it unfortunately seems like they are, on staying under that luxury tax, resetting it, getting back to the first-year tax, as opposed to spending, about twice as much in luxury tax as they would otherwise, there is basically just one way to do it at this point. Maybe 2, but really there's one obvious candidate. If the Rangers want to make some room in this CBT level to get more than $6.3 million to play with, then there's only one trade candidate that really makes any sense. No, it's not Jacob deGrom. No, they're not trading Marcus Semien or Corey Seager. No, they're not trading newly signed Nathan Eovaldi. That would be so stupid and confusing and just weird. But Jon Gray is the obvious candidate. No, not Adolis Garcia. He's going to count $7 million against luxury tax. You trade him away, and you're causing way more problems than you're solving at that point. Trading away an everyday player to go and get a slightly better closer is going to cause a whole lot more problems than it solves. And because he signed that 2-year extension to avoid arbitration, he's making $9.2 million, $9.25 million this year. Adolis Garcia, that is. But it's only counting $7 million against luxury tax. But Jon Gray, even though he's only making $13 million this year, it's counting $14 million against the luxury tax. And that is why he is the obvious candidate. You look at guys who are counting more than $10 million against luxury tax. I've listed off everybody but Tyler Mahle. Mahle's going to count 11 mil toward the luxury tax. Maybe Gray is better than Mahle this year. Maybe he gives the Rangers some more innings. But at this point, it just feels like the most obvious candidate. I like Jon Gray. He is a World Series hero. I still think that he would be more effective in the Rangers' pen than he would be in the rotation. You trade him away, and your rotation looks like this. You have DeGrom, Eovaldi, Mahle, Bradford, and Rocker as your number 5, where there are some big durability concerns for, well, everybody in that rotation. I mean, you put Jon Gray back in it, there's still big durability concerns about how many innings any of those guys can give you. And your depth behind those guys is Dunning, Leiter, Adrian Hauser. Maybe even Hauser goes above either of those guys in the pecking order. But there's a way to make this feel a lot better, and it's sign Roki Sasaki. Then you add Roki Sasaki as your number 3 starter. You push Mahle down to your 4 starter. Bradford or Rocker is your number 5 starter. Maybe you can start Kumar Rocker in the minor leagues and give him some more time to, build up, not have to work him too hard, so you can get more length out of him later, because there are big questions about how many starts, how many innings is he going to give the Texas Rangers. Same thing about Eovaldi, about Mahle, who's coming back from Tommy John surgery, about DeGrom, who's coming back from Tommy John surgery. And heck, there are even some questions about how many innings you would get out of Roki Sasaki should you sign him. But that gives you that kind of extra depth and added bonus. Or maybe the Rangers just straight up put Jon Gray in the pen and keep themselves within spitting distance of that luxury tax, all on their own with how they are right now. Maybe that's the case, but there's not really anybody else. Now that Nathaniel Lowe is traded away, those dollars are allocated a little bit differently, mainly just spent on Jock Peterson, and spend less on first base, which seems to be a more replaceable position. At least that's how it's viewed at the league level. You trade an everyday first baseman who's worth 2 to 3 wins for a reliever and some financial restrictions lifted. That's kind of tells you how the league is feeling about first basemen and how replaceable they are. I think that this is the only way that makes sense. I think that would be, ideally, that's how things go. My ideal rest of this offseason, the Rangers, trade Jon Gray for someone, or maybe just put Jon Gray in the pen, because again, I think he'd be much more helpful there. Then you sign Roki Sasaki, and then the back end of your bullpen, you get another elite back end closer type of guy in Gray, and you still are, have that space away from the luxury tax, where if the Rangers wanted to make a trade at midseason and take on just a little bit of salary, that wouldn't immediately push them into the luxury tax, because that's another reason the Rangers don't want to be, right at, say, the luxury tax is $241 million, why they don't want to be at $240.5 million. Because say what happens if the Rangers need to trade for, I don't know, a reliever, or say you have an injury to a position player and you want to make a trade for a guy who's making $5 million or whatever at the deadline, that would put you into that luxury tax. That would put you in the 3rd-year repeater kind of range where they have tried to stay away from. So having that, $6.3 million as some room for cushion gives you a little bit better of a feeling at that point. Now, who knows what the Rangers are actually going to do. I still think they are very much engaged on a reliever. There are some other creative ways the Rangers could go about signing someone like Kirby Yates and not moving into the luxury tax. It would involve a lot of deferrals and funky tomfoolery with a salary cap that can be done. And also the good thing about adding Roki is that he's going to be making league minimum. I know he's going to cost about $6 million or however much it is in the posting fee and the international bonus pool money fee, but that doesn't go towards your CBT. That is a whole other pool of money to deal with, and absolutely worth it to get a guy of Roki Sasaki's caliber for that price. And so the Rangers aren't in the perfect spot. Ideally, Ray Davis just says, okay, yeah, if you're going to be competing for a World Series, you should not be worried about the luxury tax, especially if you're not in that $20 to $40 million. You're not even in that $20 to $40 million over the luxury tax range. Like I said, if they signed him to a $15 million a year deal for 2 years, you're paying him still less than what Josh Hader is going to be making. And he was better than Hader last year. And that gives you that kind of reliability that you feel pretty good about at the back end of your pen. You have Kirby, you have that kind of, back end talented best guys in your pen like you did last year, and you also add more depth than you've had in the bullpen in God knows how long. This is the deepest bullpen in Rangers bullpen in God knows how long. I mean, even in 2023, when the three guys they needed to stepped up in the biggest of ways and were basically unhittable. At least 2 out of 3 were basically unhittable for most of the postseason. The third one was also pretty darn good. You still would have rather had a fourth guy so you didn't have to pitch Jose Leclerc every time the other team was within 5 runs in the 9th inning. But this gives you some leeway. I still think it's possible that the Rangers bluster about, we would literally die. Everyone would fall apart, and Ray Davis would be financially destitute if he has to pay $2 million in luxury tax fees. I really think that when you are at this point, when you are in this part of your competitive window, and you've already committed those big dollars to guys, to your stars like DeGrom, like Eovaldi, like your middle infielders that are making $500 million over the course of a decade. Who cares about a little bit of luxury tax? You also see this team spending in a way that they didn't last offseason. So I think it's a little bit more okay. They feel more confident about whatever the heck the TV money is going to be. It hasn't been a barrier for them spending money like it has in years past. And it seems like it did piss them off missing the playoffs. And it did embarrass them having a very mediocre season when they could have added a little bit more. If they added a little bit more in the pen, maybe they do finish closer to the Astros and they do, stretch it across the finish line or whatever else. Things break their way and maybe they do just sneak into the playoffs, because Lord knows this team should have been more talented and had more wins than the 2024 Tigers. But all of that to say, who knows what they do for the rest of this offseason. If this is it, if this is all the Rangers do, even if they don't get Roki, that's a whole other thing that we'll talk more about next week. January 23rd, by the way, is the date you should set of that's when for sure we'll know what's happening. But if Chris Martin is the last free agent signing that the Rangers did this offseason, overall, this has been a really, really good winter. I hope it's not the end of Chris Young making moves, but even if it is, this is one heck of a capper from a pretty darn good winter. Maybe not perfect, but honestly, pretty darn close. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.